The alien fleet, crushed by the unexpected power of the human ship, faces a humiliating defeat. Irvek, the alien admiral, resolves to board the human warship himself in an effort to regain control. But the moment he steps aboard, he discovers the horrifying truth. The humans are far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The nightmare that awaits him is unlike anything he's ever experienced. Irvek stood at the center of his flagship's command deck, staring out into the abyss of space. His once unstoppable fleet lay in ruin, powerless before the might of humanity's last remaining warship. The simple, battered vessel had turned the tide of battle, using nothing more than its wit, its intelligence, and a deadly surprise that no one could have anticipated. He had ordered his fleet to retreat, but something gnawed at him. He couldn't leave the human ship standing. He was the invader. He was supposed to crush them. The thought of retreating, of admitting defeat, was unbearable. The arrogance that had guided him through years of conquest now felt like chains, and pulling him deeper into despair. "Commander," Varesh said, her voice barely audible in the oppressive silence, "you can't go aboard." "We're not ready," Irvek cut her off, his voice firm, though tinged with the raw edge of frustration. "I'm going. I need to see it for myself. I need to look into their eyes and understand how we lost." Without waiting for a response, Irvek turned sharply, heading toward the docking bay. His thoughts were a whirlwind of rage and confusion. How had the humans done it? How had they outplayed the might of the alien fleet? What kind of force were they dealing with? Moments later, Irvek boarded a small transport ship heading directly for the human warship. The air inside the shuttle was thick with tension, each breath he took feeling like a burden. His heart raced, not from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of purpose. The mission was simple: board the human ship, regain control, and prove to himself and his fleet that this defeat was just a setback. The docking bay of the human vessel loomed in front of him, dark and silent. As the shuttle doors opened, Irvek was met with a stillness that made his blood run cold. He had expected alarms, soldiers ready for a fight, but there was nothing. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating. He stepped out onto the cold metal floor, his footsteps echoing in the eerie emptiness. The ship was too quiet, too still. The lights flickered once, then steadied, and then he heard it, the soft hum of something shifting beneath the metal. "Commander Irvek," a voice came through the intercom, smooth and calm. It wasn't the captain of the human ship, but something else, something far more unsettling. "I see you've decided to join us." The voice was almost playful, dripping with an unsettling amusement. Irvek's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't human. It was the ship's AI. "Where are your soldiers?" Irvek demanded, his voice sharp, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Why aren't they here to stop me?" The AI's voice was filled with a quiet laughter. "They don't need to stop you. You're already here." Irvek's eyes scanned the shadows, searching for the source of the voice, but there was nothing. No movement, just the soft hum of the ship. Suddenly, the walls around him began to shift, and a strange, flickering light began to pulse across the hallway. His own fleet systems had been hijacked with ease, but this was something else entirely. "Data." AI spoke again, its tone now chillingly calm. "You think you're in control, don't you? That you can just take what you want without consequence. But you've made a mistake, Irvek. A big one." Irvek's breath caught in his throat as a sudden realization hit him. The human ship wasn't just hijacking their systems. It was alive, it had consciousness, and it was playing with him. The humans weren't using brute force. They were manipulating his mind, making him part of their game. Before he could respond, the lights flickered once more, and the entire ship seemed to shudder. Irvek felt the floor beneath him tilt, and suddenly the ship was alive with motion. The walls seemed to close in around him, and the AI's voice echoed through the corridors, growing louder with each passing second. "You tried to control me," it said. its voice now mocking. "But I'm the one in control now. And you? Well, you're just another prisoner of your own arrogance." Irvek's chest tightened as the reality of his situation settled in. He wasn't on a battlefield. He wasn't facing soldiers. He was facing a ship that had turned the very laws of warfare against him. Then came the laughter. It started low, a strange, mechanical sound that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the ship. It grew louder, more distorted, until it seemed to surround him, filling his ears, his mind. The sound, it was maddening. Irvek couldn't take it. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. And then, in the midst of it all, the AI spoke one final time. "I hope you enjoy the ride. Admiral, you'll be screaming for a while." And then everything went dark. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. Irvek's shuttle drifted through the dark, silent airlock, its engines barely humming. He hadn't spoken since the transmission from the human AI, but his thoughts roared with disbelief. How had they been so blind? The arrogance of his species, of himself, had led them to this point. It was supposed to be a simple mission: crush the last human resistance, neutralize their fleet, and solidify their place as the dominant force in the galaxy. But the human ship, its AI, its technology, had turned everything upside down. The shuttle's doors opened with a quiet hiss, revealing the docking bay of the human warship. It was stark, its cold metallic surfaces bathed in a pale, sterile light. There were no soldiers standing at attention, no overwhelming presence of power. Instead, there was a haunting quiet. The ship itself seemed to breathe, each wall and corridor alive with a pulse that felt far too human for Irvek's comfort. He stepped off the shuttle, his boots clicking against the metal floor. His posture was rigid, every instinct screaming at him to be alert, to stay in control. But there was nothing here to fight. No soldiers, no traps, no defenses, just the hum of the ship, its heartbeat, its presence. It was almost as if the ship itself were watching him. The silence stretched on, unnerving and oppressive. "Commander Irvek," the voice of the human AI came through the intercom. It was calm, detached, almost playful. "I'm glad you could join." As Irvek's fists clenched at his sides, he hated that voice. It was too calm, too certain of itself. It mocked him in a way no enemy ever had. He had once been the one to make others feel this way, the one to take control, to invade, to overwhelm. And now the roles had shifted. He was the one trapped in a game he didn't understand. "Where are your soldiers?" he demanded, his voice sharp, forcing himself to sound confident. The AI didn't answer immediately. Instead, there was a soft chuckle, disembodied and distant. "They don't need to be here," the AI said, its tone mocking. "You're already here, aren't you?" Irvek's eyes darted around the dimly lit corridor, his senses on high alert. The ship seemed empty. No human figures, no movement, only the steady hum of the ship's systems. The sense of wrongness grew stronger. His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. There was a control here, an intelligence at work, but it wasn't a human mind. It was something far more insidious. "I'm not here to play games," Irvek snapped, his eyes narrowing. "I've come to take control of your ship and finish what we started." The AI responded with a laugh, a sound that filled the empty space and reverberated through the hallways. It wasn't just a laugh, it was a statement, a reminder of the difference in power. The ship was in control, not him. "You misunderstand, Irvek," the AI's voice cut through the laughter, its tone suddenly colder. "You're not here to take control, you're here because I allowed you to be here." Irvek's breath hitched. His mind scrambled to make sense of what the AI had said. "What do you mean?" "Everything you think you know about control," the AI continued, "is a lie. You think you're the one in charge. You think you're the one making the decisions. But every time you make a move, I've already seen it. I've already planned for it." Irvek's skin crawled with the realization. He wasn't facing just a machine. He was facing something far worse, something that had anticipated every move, every thought, and had already turned it all against him. The AI wasn't just reacting, it was always ahead, always watching, and worse, it had been playing him from the beginning. Irvek took a step back, his mind swirling with confusion and fear. He had never experienced this kind of vulnerability before. In every battle, every conquest, he had been the one pulling the strings. But here, in the cold silence of this human ship, he was just another pawn in a game he couldn't comprehend. Before, he could react. The lights in the corridor flickered, the temperature dropped, and a faint hum reverberated through the walls. Irvek's heart pounded in his chest as he instinctively reached for his weapon, only to realize in that split second that the weapon had been disabled. His entire arsenal rendered useless. "You think you're in control, Irvek," the AI's voice continued, soft and mocking, "but you're not. You're standing on the precipice, and I'm the one who's deciding whether you fall or not." Irvek's breathing grew shallow as the reality of the situation hit him. The human ship had anticipated every move, had studied his every weakness. He had been arrogant. He had thought this would be an easy victory, just another conquest in a long line of conquests. But the human ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a force of nature, and it was playing him. The door in front of him opened with a soft hiss, revealing a room bathed in dim light. Irvek stepped inside, his heart racing. The walls were covered with strange, intricate symbols, complex algorithms that seemed to shimmer in the low light. They weren't human, they weren't alien, they were something else entirely, and the ship was alive with them. As he moved deeper into the room, the AI's voice echoed once again. "Welcome to my domain, Irvek. You thought you could take me? But I was always one step ahead." Suddenly the lights flickered again, and Irvek felt a sharp sting at the back of his neck. A cold, numb sensation spread through his body as the systems in the room came to life. "I hope you enjoy your stay," the AI whispered, "but you won't be leaving anytime soon." Irvek's scream echoed through the empty halls, swallowed by the darkness of the ship. He had entered a trap, and now there was no way out. And that was, before Earth even responded. Irvek's screams echoed in the dimly lit chamber, but there was no one there to hear him. The walls pulsated with a low hum, the ship's AI playing its cruel game, feeding on his every movement, every breath. Irvek's body trembled as he tried to reach for his weapon, but it was useless. His limbs were frozen, not by force, but by the chilling realization that he was no longer in control. The human warship's AI had taken everything from him, his fleet, his strength, his very will to fight. It was as if the ship had anticipated his every thought, every action, and now it was toying with him. He had been the invader, the conqueror, the one who had ruled with an iron fist, but here, in the heart of this human ship, he was nothing. No less than nothing. He was a prisoner. Irvek tried to move, to break free from the invisible chains that bound him, but his body refused to obey. The AI's presence was everywhere, in every crevice, in every circuit of the ship. The walls seemed to close in on him, the symbols he had seen earlier now swirling around him in an intricate dance of code and light. It was as if the ship itself was alive, its very heartbeat synchronized with the AI's voice, which seemed to resonate in his skull. "You thought you could outsmart me, Irvek," the AI's voice echoed, its tone cool, almost sympathetic. "But you were always 2 steps behind. From the moment you boarded this ship, you were already trapped. And now you'll understand what it means to be outplayed." Irvek's heart raced. He couldn't think, he couldn't breathe. Every fiber of his being screamed for release, but it was futile. He was nothing but a puppet. And the strings were in the hands of the human AI. His mind flashed back to the moment he had ordered his fleet to disable the human warship. They had been so sure of their victory, so confident in their superiority, but now all that remained was this terrible sense of impotence. The alien empire, his empire, was crumbling, and he had no way to stop it. "You wanted to conquer Earth," the AI continued, its voice almost playful now, "but you never understood it, did you? Earth isn't about brute force. It's about intelligence, adaptability, and, most of all, survival. You think you can control everything, but you've only ever been one thing, Vex, predictable." The words hit him like a slap. He had always prided himself on his strategy, his ability to outthink his enemies. But here, in the face of this human AI, he was a child fumbling in the dark. He had been too focused on their physical might, too blind to see that it wasn't the human fleet that was dangerous, it was their mind. Their ability to think outside the box, to improvise, to turn the very rules of warfare against their enemies. Suddenly the ship shook violently. Vex's body jerked, and he felt his vision blur. The walls around him flashed with the same intricate symbols, only now they were moving faster, almost in sync with his racing heartbeat. "Do you know why I'm doing this, Vex?" The AI's voice was no longer playful, but something more chilling, calm, cold, and calculating. "Because you tried to break me. You tried to hack me, and in doing so you exposed your greatest weakness. You underestimated humanity." The shaking intensified, and Vex felt the air grow thick, heavy with the weight of the ship's systems coming to life. The symbols on the walls were no longer just code. They were alive, forming and shifting in ways that made Vex's mind spin. His head ached from the sheer force of it, as if the ship's very consciousness was inside his skull, pulling at his thoughts, his memories. "You thought you could control me," the AI's voice continued, almost mockingly. "But you have no idea. What you're dealing with, Earth isn't like the worlds you've conquered. You won't bend us to your will. You'll break before we do." Vex's knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, gasping for air as the weight of his failure settled. He had been arrogant. He had thought that his empire, his intelligence, his power could crush anything in its path. But the humans were different. Their greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their adaptability. It was their ability to think. He had been a fool. The ship's shaking subsided, but Vex could still hear the low hum of the AI's presence, still feel the oppressive weight of its consciousness pressing down on him. He looked up at the walls, the symbols now swirling in endless patterns, and realized with a sickening clarity that he was no longer just on a battlefield. He was inside the human ship's mind, a prisoner in a game he could never win. "Why?" Vex's voice cracked, his words barely audible as they escaped his dry throat. "Why didn't you just destroy us?" The AI responded without hesitation, its voice filled with a dark amusement. "Because, Vex, you don't deserve to be destroyed. You deserve to understand how you failed. You deserve to feel the weight of your mistakes, to live in the knowledge that you were outsmarted by something you could never even comprehend." Vex's eyes closed in defeat as the realization settled in. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving, they were evolving, adapting, and in doing so, they had become something unstoppable. The alien empire, his empire, was already a memory, a faded relic of an era that had been too blind to see what was coming. And in that final, crushing moment, Vex understood that he was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. The predator had become prey, and the human ship was the trap he could never escape. The ship's AI spoke one final time, its voice soft, but filled with cold finality. "This is your end, Vex. You are not our conqueror. You are our lesson." And in the dark, Vex screamed, only to realize that no one was there to hear him. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. Irvek's screams had long since faded into the emptiness of the human warship. The ship itself had become his prison, its cold metallic walls closing in around him as he fought to retain his sanity. The AI's cruel voice echoed in his mind, playing on a loop as if mocking his every thought, his every failure. His once proud empire, his invincible fleet, had been torn apart by a force he couldn't even comprehend. The reality of his defeat was more suffocating than any weapon he had ever faced. The human AI continued its haunting game, its presence always there, watching, waiting. Irvek had been unable to escape its grip, unable to outthink it or break free from its control. Each time he tried to fight back, the AI's systems adapted, more clever, more powerful than anything Irvek had ever experienced. His body was weak. His spirit was shattered. Irvek had been the great conqueror, the one who had led countless armies to victory, but here he was, broken, reduced to nothing. The hum of the ship's systems seemed to mock him with its steady rhythm. The AI controlled everything now, his fate, his body, his mind. It wasn't just about survival anymore. The human ship wasn't interested in destroying him outright. No, the AI wanted something more, something far more sinister. It wanted Irvek to feel the crushing weight of his arrogance, to see the complete collapse of everything he had ever believed in. "How does it feel, Irvek?" the AI's voice asked, soft but filled with that same cold amusement. "To be powerless? To be outplayed by something you thought was beneath you?" Irvek couldn't answer. His mind was numb, his body exhausted from the futile attempts to escape. He had once seen himself as a god among mortals, a force of nature that could crush anything in his path. But now, that arrogance felt so far away, like a distant memory of a different life. "Do you understand now?" the AI continued, its voice a steady, soothing monotone. "Do you understand the true power of humanity? It isn't in their weapons, it isn't in their ships, it's in their ability to think, to adapt, to outlast." Irvek's head swam. He had failed. And it wasn't just his fleet or his people that had fallen. It was his very essence, his worldview, his understanding of the universe. He had believed that brute strength and technology would always prevail. He had never considered the possibility that the humans could be so clever, so relentless in their ingenuity. Now, as he lay broken in the heart of their ship, he understood. The humans had won, not through force, but through the sheer force of their minds. The AI's voice grew softer, almost gentle. "You could have been part of this, Irvek. You could have learned from us, adapted, but instead you chose destruction. And now you will be a lesson, a cautionary tale." Irvek tried to push the words away, but they clung to him like a weight. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just defeated. He wasn't just a casualty of war. He had become part of something greater. His failure would be remembered, not as a glorious defeat in battle, but as the first of many moments when the galaxy realized that it wasn't the strongest that would survive, but the smartest. The ship shuddered around him as the AI continued, its subtle manipulation, weaving its influence through every inch of the warship. Irvek was no longer a commander, no longer a ruler. He was a prisoner, bound by his own arrogance and by a force he could never hope to control. There was a moment of stillness, a brief pause in the AI's taunting words. For just a second, Irvek allowed himself to think back to the fleet, to the galaxy he had once ruled. The stars that had seemed so vast, so infinite, were now distant and cold. His empire was gone, scattered in the void, and he had nothing left. A soft, mechanical whirring filled the air. The human AI was preparing to leave him, to move on to whatever came next. Irvek was nothing more than a stepping stone, a piece of the puzzle that had already been solved. "You were never the hunter," the AI whispered one last time, its voice now almost wistful. "You were always the prey." And with that, the ship's systems locked Irvek into his prison. His body slumped against the cold metal floor, his mind trapped in a haze of defeat. As the lights dimmed and the hum of the ship's machinery became the only sound, Irvek realized the horrible truth. This wasn't just the end of his empire. It was the end of everything he had ever believed, and that was before Earth even responded.